No, all I was going to say was, regardless of where the target percentage would be, and economists agree and have these conversations all the time, the American people are suffering and they vote on their pocketbooks, as we all know. And if they realize that prices for things are through the roof compared to where they used to be, they're looking for someone to blame. And while Joe Biden tries to pass the buck consistently, he's the president. And so people will, rightly or wrongly, according to you, blame Joe Biden for it. That's the fallout.
True. I'm an immigrant from Argentina. We came here legally. I'm now an American citizen. People still write to me and say, you should go back to Argentina. But listen, I don't want the left characterized as something that it isn't on this issue. You'll never hear me say a country doesn't have a right to enforce
dead to rights.
policy.
Otherwise, we'd have different policy. I mean, Hogan, you work for the Trump administration. The first thing that Joe Biden did when he took over was to reverse the three principal things that Trump was doing to stop the flow of illegal migrants across the southern border, the Remain in Mexico program, the asylum seekers en masse, and the construction of the border wall. He shut it all down. He sold off all the parts. You couldn't even try to rebuild the wall thanks to what he did.
In this one, we're going to take a look at a debate between David Pakman and Hogan Gidley, who was Donald Trump's press secretary in 2019 and 2020. They both go on the Megyn Kelly show and have a nice debate. And this should be a good one, with David Pakman being a progressive versus Hogan Gidley, who was formerly a part of Trump's administration, and then of course Megyn Kelly. So it's probably going to be a 2-on-1 here. I'm not sure if Hogan Gidley is one of these former Trump administrators, one of his associates that has a bone to pick with Trump. So I'm curious how this is going to go. It should be a good one. So let's go ahead and get her started.
We've just learned to be very distrustful and to see these missions as about something very different, maybe money, the so-called military-industrial complex, that the leaders don't necessarily have our boys and young women now in best interests at heart, the forever wars that take us nowhere. It's like, well, look at the difference in those 80 years between the way America and Americans feel about the military and our endeavors.
Yeah, and David went political off the top, so let me do the same. I think that's hard to accomplish in today's society because you have an entire political party who continues to tell the American people that our country is the cause of the world's problems. We're the root of all evil. And I mentioned the difficult times we've had in the past. That's not unique to America. It is unique, though, that we come out of those times usually more unified. But that's hard to do, because Democrats writ large basically apologize for America all the time. They go on the global stage and they talk about how bad we are. And while we do have issues, don't get me wrong, we used to share a common thread of respect and love for one another because we lived in the greatest nation, the greatest idea ever realized. And so there's a reason that countries like Cuba and people around the world walk through their streets holding our American flag and chant liberty and freedom, because they know what so many on the left don't believe, which is America's still the beacon of hope and of strength and of goodness and of democracy all over the world. And that's hard to unite behind when half of the country doesn't believe it.
What's your response, David? What do you think?
No, listen, there's a reason why Hogan and a lot of other former Trump folks and wannabe Trump folks and current Trump folks are saying things like what Hogan's saying. Democrats are a huge problem and they're apologizing and all these things. These folks are desperate because they've lost everything since Trump won by 77,000 votes in 3 states in 2016. And let me lay this out, Megyn, if I can. It's been 8 years. After that squeaker in 2016, they blew the 2018 midterms. Trump got defeated in 2020. The 2022 red wave led to Democrats growing their margin in the Senate. 2023 was a disaster. After repealing Roe v. Wade, every referendum on abortion has gone the opposite way. So there's an incredible desperation. And I have to say, Hogan, this is not a personal attack in any way. You seem like a really nice guy. We don't know each other. There's almost an affirmative action with these Trump folks where if these were football coaches that had lost everything for a decade, Kayleigh McEnany wouldn't be on Fox News. We wouldn't be going to Hogan and saying, give us your state. They've lost everything. And somehow through some kind of affirmative action, I guess we still hear from them, but they're desperate, Megyn, because this has gone sideways for a decade.
Wait, what are you suggesting, David, that because the Republicans have had a rough couple of electoral cycles, everyone who is on Team Trump should just go underground? They shouldn't speak anymore,
No,
even though
by no
he's
means.
going to be the Republican nominee?
No, I'm glad to hear from Hogan, but there's a degree to which we would say, wait a second, how could his analysis, or it's not about Hogan, how could any of these analyses really accurately reflect reality when these are the analyses that lost them everything in 4 or 5 elections in a row? I would approach it with caution.
Go ahead, Hogan. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Okay. Let's unpack that. By that rationale, I guess we should never hear from Hillary Clinton again either, because she lost. Any Democrat who loses an election, you can't hear from them. Anybody who worked in a White House, worked in administration, shouldn't have a say-so in what's going on in this country. Of course, this is a battle between those who love America and those who hate America, because the positions of both parties they've been clearly articulated now for a long time. And so I think moving into 2024, as we kind of reset, and now we've lived under the failed policies of Joe Biden for the last 4 years, where Americans have been kicked in the teeth. They can't afford gas and groceries. Crimes are spiking all over their communities. Wars are breaking out all over the world. The southern borders bringing in, fentanyl, killing our American citizens, human trafficking, child smuggling. It's all up. I think the stark reality of the fact that we've got an upcoming election where these two men uniquely have a record, not as a governor saying, if you elect me, I promise I'll do this. I'm a senator. I did this for my state. Both of these folks were president. The records are stark. And the juxtaposition where we used to have to point back to Reagan, Megyn, you just played an incredible speech. Remember how good it was in the 80s? We can say we had record-setting success in record-setting time 3 years ago. It took one guy and his demented policies to tear us down this quickly. So this election, no question, is going to be significant for the future of America. But to say someone who lost an election or wasn't part of the winning team shouldn't have a say-so is so insane.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, of course I'm not saying they shouldn't have a say-so. What I'm saying is at this point, it seems clear the American people see through it. And the people who lost 5 elections in a row are not the ones I'd be listening to on policy. Now, with regard to a lot of the stuff that Hogan mentioned there, we can go but one by one or not. I mean, just to pick a couple of things, because there was a lot there. On inflation, I mean, listen, groceries and gas, they were even cheaper under Obama. They were even cheaper under Bush and cheaper under Clinton. I mean, yes, there is inflation. We have not had a deflationary spiral, but inflation's at about 3% right now, which is what every serious economist says is the target. With regard to the record right now, unemployment, I mean, it's almost silly for me to do this because the American people know, but we've never had unemployment below 4%. We've never had unemployment below 4% for this long in 50 years, and it remains there. Wage growth has outpaced inflation. GDP is a completely normal and healthy 3%. It's like people know this.
Why don't you try immigration? Because that's in the news today, David. Yeah. Take that one up.
So I want to address one thing, one of his points right there before he continues. The reason why wage growth is down and it's not keeping up with inflation is because the Democratic Party keeps importing illegal immigrants, but not just importing them, right? They're putting them on work visas via the asylum. It's a workaround for our system. They don't just come in and they're illegal and they can't work. They come in, they go through the processes of seeking asylum as refugees. They get a work visa, they get an ID, they get debit cards with money. All kinds of stuff, right? But the fact is, these people are willing to work for lower wages. So they're taking the jobs that Americans are holding out for, they're not willing to do because they're not offering enough money to provide a living wage to somebody that's trying to start a family or buy a house or anything like that. So while they hold out and play the game that they're supposed to in order to get these companies, these big corporate machines, to start offering enough money at the ground level or for just so people can afford a living wage, instead, these asylum seekers are going and taking these jobs at the wages being offered, and it's cutting off the American people that are holding out for higher wages at the knees. And no, I'm not saying that we need the government to dictate minimum wage or anything like that, like California is, which is wrecking companies. I don't want to wreck companies, but I want these companies to be able to work with the American workers so that the Americans that are providing their time to these companies are compensated properly so that they can function in the way that they need to.
Well, I mean, ask me a question about it. What's the
are
question?
we doing better under Joe Biden when it comes to illegal immigration than we were under Trump?
How do you define better?
Fewer.
People continue to cross over illegally as they have for, 100 years, 200 years?
So it's the same.
I think
It's the
that
same.
one of the funny things that has
That's not
happened is
honest.
that for months, I'm sorry, I think we're talking over each other.
No, I'm saying that's dishonest. You're saying don't trust the Republicans on their messaging, and you come on here and want to tell me that it's the same. Like they're just continuing.
No,
there's
there's
been no
ebbs and
increase.
flows. There have been periods of
A couple of months ago, we had
concede, Megyn,
10,000 a day
you-
crossing the southern border. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry,
and
I think we're all talking over each other.
now, you know,
Go
you
ahead, David. The
realize
floor is
too,
yours. Wait, Hogan, I'll bring you in, but let me defend that. Go ahead, David.
Oh, okay. No, listen, I mean, based on the Border Patrol statistics, there have been times during the Biden administration where crossings have on average been below where they were under Trump. At some points, they were above that. The funniest
Wow.
part to me about immigration is that now that Republicans themselves torpedoed the bill they wanted because Trump said, no, I need something to run on, I need something to do, Biden puts in place this limitation, which, by the way, doesn't solve the reason people are trying to come here. We need more immigration judges. I'm glad Biden made this point. Now that he did it, they're still not happy. And they're saying, well, it's only for political reasons. Why do you think Trump wanted to do this? It's also for political reasons. So this seems like a political game to me when the reality, Megyn, is we never permanently deal with DACA. We never permanently deal with the reasons people even want to come over here in the first place. It's a lame political football.
Wow.
You
Okay, go
notice-
ahead. It's fascinating to me for me to hear. I have to say, David, I appreciate you coming on the show because we don't get a lot of progressives, and they know I don't really agree with them on most things.
I don't know why not.
I actually really I appreciate you being here and saying, the way you see these things and the way the left views these things, because it's actually educational.
Well, I don't know about the left, but listen, I'm on the left. Countries have a right to enforce immigration policy. If you're here illegally, of course, you're subject to deportation. I mean, I think that there's a caricaturizing that happens of the left on this issue. I'm an immigrant from Argentina. We came here legally. I'm now an American citizen. People still write to me and say, you should go back to Argentina. But listen, I don't want the left characterized as something that it isn't on this issue. You'll never hear me say a country doesn't have a right to enforce
dead to rights.
policy.
Otherwise, we'd have different policy. I mean, Hogan, you work for the Trump administration. The first thing that Joe Biden did when he took over was to reverse the three principal things that Trump was doing to stop the flow of illegal migrants across the southern border, the Remain in Mexico program, the asylum seekers en masse, and the construction of the border wall. He shut it all down. He sold off all the parts. You couldn't even try to rebuild the wall thanks to what he did. Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Hogan.
All right. First things first. You notice Dave said, most economists will tell you that the correct percentage, I know that's a bad impression, Dave, but nonetheless, yeah, economists don't matter in this scenario. The American people do. They're paying more for simple goods and services that they weren't paying under Donald Trump, and they know that. It's like a tax heaped upon their head. As far as the border is concerned, because I was in the White House during this, and I had a lot of fights with press folks about this very topic. Joe Biden looks around and acts as though these things are just happening to him. They're happening because of him, in large measure because of the policy. He wants the border open. Now, I would argue he wants to flood this country with people illegally to get them on the government dime and then have them vote Democrat in perpetuity. But this whole show press conference he had the other day is insane for so many reasons. First of all, I was told the border was secure. So what are we even talking about? Second of all, I was told he couldn't do anything. He, from the executive branch, made all these changes, but somehow that requires a legislative solution. That doesn't make any sense. He did it because it's going to get enjoined, and the courts are going to step in and say, no, you can't do this. And he can say, see, I was going to do something, but the Republicans wouldn't do it because MAGA and Trump said they couldn't. You realize the Senate had a bill that could not pass the Senate. The House had a bill. That was H.R. 2. The Senate won't take it up. And the reason what Joe Biden wants to do won't secure the border at all, forget the nuance of it, even though we could go through point by point and show you how it doesn't. The media and the left love it. If it actually secured the border, they'd want no part of it whatsoever. So to hear the left try and rewrite history that somehow immigration was just as high under Donald Trump is absolute insanity. The American people know it because back then it was just along the southern border. Now, thanks to Republican governors who had the guts to send people into these communities that say they wanted them, when they got there, that lasted about 15 minutes. And then they realized it was a strain on the education system, the healthcare system, the first responders, et cetera. They realized this is no good. Now, all of a sudden, he's coming to pretend as though he's trying to do something. And one more thing about the courts. He's going to back down because somebody will enjoin this. He doesn't have a problem when the Supreme Court says you don't have the right to forgive student loan debt and pass off someone else's college tuition to another person. He doesn't care about that. He goes right through it. When a court says, hey, you can't mandate vaccines on 80 million people, he says, to hell with the courts. I'll go through OSHA and try to force the American people to do that. So spare me the pearl clutching. This is all his fault. And the American people know it because when he did overturn everything, every single person in the media said, this is the humane way to do it. He's doing the right thing. The administration joked and said, too many executive orders for us to even understand. I don't even remember it. We've done so many. They know it. They broke it. They bought it.
Go ahead, Dave.
You know, I have to say that there's so much there. I don't even know that we could go through every single thing, but just to pick where Hogan started on inflation and kind of ridiculing economists and this and that, Hogan just said that because certain things were cheaper under Trump, it's a failure of Biden. Will Hogan acknowledge, therefore, that because those very same goods were cheaper under Obama, Trump also did something wrong?
Well, I'm sure they were cheaper under Grover Cleveland, too. That's not the point.
That's exactly the point.
The point is, where are we now?
You're just making
Can we get the inflation back to where we were? And the answer is yes, with the right policy.
Are you calling for a deflationary spiral? I mean, here's the thing I don't understand, Megyn, and I'm not asking this rhetorically. I actually want to understand this as someone with a background in economics. If inflation goes below zero, you create a deflationary spiral where people
Even Trump
expect
said that.
things to be cheaper in the future, and so they wait to buy anything, which hurts the economy. This is why.
Let me just add to that.
economics,
So even Trump said this on the stump just last week. He said we were around 1.4%, which is even better than zero for the exact reasons you just cited. Keep going.
2 to 3 is typically what you want. That's where economic growth comes from. So the thing I struggle with, and I really do want to understand it, because for me, people who know me know I don't play political games with gas prices. I don't play political games with inflation. My view on this is just from economics. The goal from which traditional economics, not Marxist left-wing stuff, traditional economics says you want around 3% inflation, because that is an incentive to buy now rather than later, and it's where wage growth and economic growth comes from. Hogan seems to, I guess, want deflation, which doesn't seem to be good. So just maybe someone who knows more can explain it to me.
No, I guess that's not happening now. Okay, let's go.
Let's
go back to immigration. Oh, go ahead, Hogan,
Okay.
if you want to.
No, all I was going to say was, regardless of where the target percentage would be, and economists agree and have these conversations all the time, the American people are suffering, and they vote on their pocketbooks, as we all know. And if they realize that prices for things are through the roof compared to where they used to be, they're looking for someone to blame. And while Joe Biden tries to pass the buck consistently, he's the president. And so people will, rightly or wrongly, according to you, blame Joe Biden for it. That's the fallout. You're at the desk. You make the decisions.
I agree on the political analysis 100%. So on that, people vote on their perception of the economy. No argument for me whatsoever, Hogan.
And Trump's got a 20-point lead over Joe Biden on that, according to the latest poll. So they're definitely blaming Joe Biden. And, you know, that is tied to some of the spending he did when he first took over. Trump spent a lot, too. I want to stay on immigration for a minute, though, because Joe Biden is now issuing these executive orders, which he said he couldn't do. And what struck me was he's now going to do, let me get the numbers in front of me. He's going to allow, asylum will be suspended when the threshold reaches an average of 2,500 migrants each day. So he's not going to allow asylum seekers if we have an average of 2,500 migrants each day. He would lift that suspension when there's a daily average of less than 1,500 encounters. What's amazing to me is I remember anchoring in the chair on Fox when Barack Obama's immigration head said 1,000 a day is a crisis. That is a true crisis. Whatever we do, we can't let it get to 1,000 a day. And now here we are with an influx of over more than 8 million since then. That's not even counting the numbers that did come in under Trump, though he was committed to trying to stop that. So now here we are with let's call it 10 million, 11. I know the numbers are vastly bigger than that, but let's just call it 10 million. With this president saying 2,500, definitely 1,500 is fine. We won't suspend asylum, which is nuts. I mean, that's absolutely nuts to me, Dave. Why is the threshold anywhere near this high?
This is to me?
Yeah.
Oh, so here's my view on immigration, and I already laid out part of it. I believe that without immigrants, the country collapses, and I think it's abundantly clear. If anything, as far as legal immigration, we probably need to increase it significantly to remain globally competitive, especially as birth rates are starting to decline. Big picture, I think that that's a big issue here. In addition to this, when it comes to the sort of crime narrative, we know from very good studies, both state and federal, both documented and undocumented immigrants commit crime at lower rates than natural-born citizens. Now, I know Trump
even
loves
one
the
is too
lurid
many. Let me just
tales.
take you on that. Well, even one is too many. Why do I have to deal with these illegal immigrants committing felonies against my friends or family when they shouldn't even be here? American-born, that's one thing. I got to deal with Americans. Why should I have to deal with somebody from Venezuela who snuck in here illegally and committed a felony against a family member?
I'm not denying that if they are here illegally, they are subject to deportation, but I'm trying to build up my view to try to have a conversation that goes beyond the talking points on this. So if we start
that's not a talking point. That's actual crimes. We just asked Laken Riley's family down in Georgia.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I
guess it doesn't
correcting
really,
you.
Like you're talk, it's fine.
I want you to talk, but you're casting an aspersion that I'm spewing out some sort of talking points to you, and I'm saying actual Americans are being killed. It's not a talking point.
We're not really digging more deeply here. We're not really digging more deeply. So we have a situation here where obviously we are completely understaffed when it comes to immigration judges and being able to adjudicate these asylum claims. We also have circumstances in people's home countries that we could be better working on at a fraction of what it costs to deal with the problem domestically, which no one ever wants to do.
Wait, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Trump's Remain in Mexico laws take care of that issue? We didn't need extra judges. We didn't need extra bureaucrats being hired on a federal dime when these migrants were required to stay in Mexico. These progressives trip me out sometimes. They want to keep shifting and changing, and they think that that's progress, when we've been at this for a long time, and sometimes the issue has already been solved. The problem has already been solved. You don't just let people come in. You make them stay in Mexico, where their country of origin or whatever, the border they're trying to cross. Then it becomes a financial burden on Mexico, and then Mexico is more incentivized to stop just sending everybody up and letting people into their country to filter through Mexico into our country, as opposed to just having open borders, putting everybody on asylum, letting them all come through and giving them everything on the American taxpayers' dime.
To do. I actually think that one of the great tragedies on this issue is that both Democrats and Republicans, for different reasons, have been unable to get us closer to what we might call a more semi-permanent solution on some of the low-hanging fruit. I mean, even most Republicans I talk to acknowledge the individuals brought here undocumented when they were minors. We're not going to send them back. They need a path to normalization here, whether it's a permanent residency or citizenship. There's so many things everybody agrees on. And for different reasons, either because they don't want their political enemies to get the credit for it or because they want to save it for when they get elected as something to run on, we could deal with probably 80% of this. I think this might be crazy. I think Hogan and I could agree on 80% of this if we were in charge of this. And it's disgusting to me how both sides, to different degrees, end up getting in the way of permanent solutions for political reasons. Now, obviously, as someone on the left, I'm more partial to the view of immigration that I think is more on my side than Hogan's. But that being said, I don't see any progress on this issue because everybody wants to keep reserve and use it to their advantage in a way that goes beyond other issues. And I
Let me
think
ask you about that, Hogan. Let me ask you about that because Trump, as you well know, his biggest critic on immigration is Ann Coulter, who is a dyed-in-the-wool conservative. And she's as angry as anybody about the fact that, as Dave just said, the wall was not built. Now, Trump had constructed some wall, but it was not completed the way Trump promised. And to Dave's point, Trump had control of Congress and the White House. The Republicans had control of Congress and the White House for his first 2 years of his presidency. He actually could have pushed massive reform through on immigration and did not do it.
Yeah, with Paul Ryan as Speaker, I don't think so. I mean, some of the biggest fights we had internally at the White House were with Republicans who didn't want to change the system, who didn't want to build the wall. Remember, we had to use military money to do it. Nancy Pelosi stood up many times and pounded her fist in those meetings or walked out and said, I'm not giving a single dime to this border wall, and then went on to sign multiple budgets that had border wall funding in it. So Dave's right. The whole thing's a political sham and theater for the most part. I would argue more on the left and the right. But even still, the solution here has to do with preventing people from coming into this country illegally. Yes. We already let in more than a million people a year legally. So how many should we let in, I guess, is the real question here. And as far as what you pointed out at the beginning, Megyn, think of it this way. Every rape, every murder, every burglary, every assault, every DUI committed by an illegal alien is 100% preventable because they should not be here in the first place. And while our citizens may commit crime at a higher rate than legal or illegal immigrants, we got our own problems. Why would we import more? And
I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious what you guys have to say about this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.